Welcome to Forgotten History, the channel where we dive into the lesser-known, often overlooked stories that shape the world we live in today. From unsung heroes to pivotal moments hidden in the shadows of history, our mission is to bring these fascinating tales to light. Today, we're exploring a side of Abraham Lincoln that you might not know. Not as the towering figure who ended slavery or as the president who guided America through its darkest hour, but as a young lawyer in Illinois. Before he sat in the Oval Office, Lincoln was a man of conviction and compassion, defending the voiceless and seeking justice where others would not. Our story begins with a courtroom battle over a young, enslaved girl whose very freedom was at stake. This moment, though small in the grand sweep of history, reveals the moral backbone of a man who would later change the course of a nation. So, grab a seat, and let's uncover the forgotten story of how Abraham Lincoln fought for freedom long before he was president. To understand the story of Abraham Lincoln's fight for justice, we must first step back and explore the America of the mid-1800s, a nation deeply divided by the institution of slavery. In this era, the country was a patchwork of free and slave states. States like Illinois, where Lincoln lived, had outlawed slavery. However, neighboring states still upheld the brutal practice, and the tension between these two Americas was palpable. Laws governing slavery were often inconsistent, creating loopholes that allowed enslavers to exploit individuals even in free territories. Illinois, as a free state, offered hope to many seeking refuge from bondage, but it was not immune to the moral and legal dilemmas of the time. Enslaved individuals brought into Illinois by their owners were technically free under state law, but enforcing that freedom often required legal battles. It was a period of profound contradiction. While the ideals of liberty and equality were enshrined in the nation's founding documents, they were far from realized for many. For Abraham Lincoln, a man deeply influenced by his frontier upbringing and self-education, this societal divide was not just an abstract issue. It was a reality he encountered frequently in his legal practice, where he defended those who could not defend themselves. The America of Lincoln's time was a land of opportunity for some and oppression for others. And it was this stark contrast that set the stage for the case we are about to explore. Before Abraham Lincoln became the revered President of the United States, he was a humble and determined lawyer in Springfield, Illinois. His journey to the legal profession was anything but ordinary. Born into a poor frontier family, Lincoln taught himself the law by borrowing books, studying tirelessly by candlelight, and walking miles to attend court sessions. His path to success was built on resilience and an unshakable belief in justice. By the 1840s, Lincoln had established himself as one of the most respected attorneys in Illinois. Known for his honesty and sharp intellect, he gained the nickname Honest Abe long before his presidency. His clients ranged from farmers and merchants to those who couldn't afford to pay him. Lincoln often took cases pro bono, especially when he believed someone was being treated unfairly. In the courtroom, Lincoln was a force to be reckoned with. He had an uncanny ability to simplify complex legal arguments, making them accessible to juries. His wit and storytelling skills often disarmed opponents and endeared him to judges and spectators alike. But what set him apart wasn't just his legal acumen, it was his moral compass. Lincoln believed deeply in the principles of justice and equality, values that would later define his presidency. In Springfield, he lived modestly, sharing an office with other lawyers and working long hours. Despite his growing reputation, Lincoln remained grounded, treating everyone with respect and empathy. This period of his life shaped the leader he would become, laying the foundation for his future battles against injustice, including the one central to our story today. Our story takes a dramatic turn as we meet the central figure whose life hung in the balance, a young enslaved girl brought into Illinois under dubious circumstances. Her name has been lost to history, but her plight shines a light on the cruel and often convoluted system of slavery in the mid-19th century. She had been transported into Illinois, a free state, by her so-called owner, a man seeking to profit from her labor. Despite Illinois' laws prohibiting slavery, loopholes and weak enforcement allowed enslavers to exploit individuals. The young girl, vulnerable, and without legal recourse, was placed up for sale in blatant defiance of the state's legal framework. The emotional stakes of this case were enormous. For her, the difference between freedom and bondage came down to a single legal decision. This wasn't just a battle over ownership. It was a fight for her humanity, her dignity, and her future. Abraham Lincoln became aware of her situation through his legal network. Deeply moved by her story, he took the case pro bono, determined to use the law to protect her from exploitation. For Lincoln, this was more than just another legal matter. It was a moral imperative. His involvement would bring hope to a girl who had likely never known it before and would test the boundaries of justice in a deeply divided society. Abraham Lincoln's decision to take the case of the young enslaved girl was not just a matter of legal strategy. It was a demonstration of his compassion and moral resolve. When the case was brought to his attention, Lincoln was appalled by the clear violation of Illinois law. Here was a child, stripped of her rights and dignity, in desperate need of an advocate. Without hesitation, Lincoln agreed to take the case, refusing payment from those who brought it to him. Lincoln's approach to the case reflected his pragmatic and empathetic nature. He meticulously prepared his arguments, poring over legal precedents and statutes that established Illinois as a free state. He recognized that this case was more than just a fight for one person's freedom. It was a test of the law's ability to uphold justice in a divided nation. To Lincoln, this was an opportunity to challenge the injustices of a system that allowed such exploitation to persist. He believed that the law should serve as a shield for the vulnerable and a tool to rectify wrongs. As the case gained attention, Lincoln's resolve only strengthened. He understood the stakes, not just for the young girl, but for the moral fabric of the society he lived in. Lincoln's involvement in the case exemplified his willingness to stand up for what was right, even in the face of significant societal and political pressures. This case was not just another entry in his legal career. It was a defining moment that foreshadowed the battles he would fight on the national stage. The day of the trial arrived, and the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Spectators packed the wooden benches, their whispers hushed as the judge called the court to order. At the center of it all stood Abraham Lincoln, calm yet resolute, ready to argue a case that would challenge both the law and the conscience of those present. Lincoln began his argument by citing Illinois' status as a free state. He laid out the legal precedents, emphasizing that the laws clearly prohibited the sale of enslaved individuals within its borders. His voice, steady but impassioned, resonated through the room as he declared, "No person brought into Illinois under its laws can remain a slave. The moment they touch our soil, they are free." The opposition, however, was formidable. The enslaver's lawyer argued that property laws superseded state regulations and claimed the girl's status as property was protected under the Constitution. The debate grew tense as the opposing counsel attempted to discredit Lincoln's interpretation of the law. But Lincoln's strength lay in his ability to connect legal principles with moral clarity. He turned to the jury, his gaze unwavering, and asked, "Is it justice to deny a child the freedom that this state promises to all who enter its borders? If the law does not protect her, what does it stand for?" His words silenced the room, leaving even the most skeptical jurors visibly moved. Throughout the proceedings, Lincoln faced challenges not just from the opposing counsel, but also from a judicial system steeped in compromises over slavery. Yet, his persistence and eloquence steadily dismantled the arguments against the girl's freedom. The case culminated in a dramatic closing statement where Lincoln painted a vivid picture of the young girl's future. "If we fail her today," he said, "we fail ourselves as a people. We must decide if our laws are merely words or a promise of hope." The courtroom was silent as Lincoln took his seat, the weight of his argument lingering in the air. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the jury filed back in, their faces solemn and unreadable. All eyes turned toward the judge as he prepared to deliver the verdict. The young girl sat motionless, her hands clasped tightly together, while Abraham Lincoln watched with quiet intensity, his expression a mixture of hope and resolve. The judge's gavel struck, and the room fell silent. In the matter of the girl brought into this court under violation of Illinois state law, the judge began, It is the decision of this court that she is free. For a brief moment, there was only silence. Then, the gravity of the words settled over the room. A murmur rippled through the crowd, growing into a wave of emotion. The girl's face transformed from fear to disbelief, and finally, to an overwhelming joy. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she turned to look at Lincoln, who nodded at her with a quiet smile. For Lincoln, this victory was more than a legal triumph. It was a validation of the principles he had fought so hard to uphold. For the young girl, it was the beginning of a life no longer defined by chains or fear. The crowd began to file out of the courtroom, but the moment lingered in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. This was not just a victory for one individual. It was a statement about the power of justice and the courage of those willing to fight for it. For the girl, it was a moment she would never forget. For Lincoln, it was a step closer to the man he would become, a leader who would one day fight to ensure freedom for all. As the courtroom emptied and the echoes of the gavel faded, Abraham Lincoln lingered, lost in thought. This case was more than just a legal battle. It was a moment that crystallized his growing convictions about justice and equality. Walking back to his modest office in Springfield, Lincoln reflected on what this victory truly meant. For Lincoln, this case was not simply about the freedom of one young girl. It was a stark reminder of the injustices embedded in the nation's laws and systems. He had seen firsthand how human dignity could be stripped away with the stroke of a pen, and how the courtroom could become a battleground for morality. This experience deepened his belief that the law must be a force for good, a shield for the vulnerable, and a tool to correct wrongs. This case stayed with Lincoln, shaping his perspective and his resolve. It was one of many moments that informed his later speeches, his policies, and his unyielding fight against the institution of slavery. The lessons he learned here echoed in his words at Gettysburg and in the Emancipation Proclamation, both of which reflected a vision for a nation where freedom and equality were not just ideals but realities. For Lincoln, this case wasn't the culmination of his journey. It was a beginning. It was a stepping stone on the path to becoming the leader who would guide a fractured nation through its darkest hour. The young girl's freedom marked a victory that resonated far beyond the courtroom, planting seeds of change that would one day grow into a movement. As he sat at his desk that evening, pen in hand, Lincoln knew that justice was not always an easy road. But in his heart, he also knew it was the only road worth traveling. The case of the young enslaved girl may have seemed small in the grand scope of history, but it reflected a profound truth. Individual acts of justice can spark larger waves of change. Abraham Lincoln's defense of the girl was not just a victory for her freedom. It was a statement about the power of standing up for what is right, even when the odds are stacked against you. In a nation divided by the institution of slavery, acts like Lincoln's reminded people that the law could be a force for good, a means to challenge oppression. It was these small but significant moments of resistance that laid the groundwork for the abolitionist movement and eventually the Civil War. Lincoln's actions served as a beacon of hope, inspiring others to step forward and fight for justice in their own ways. History teaches us that change is rarely instantaneous. It is built on the cumulative efforts of individuals who refuse to accept the status quo. Each case, each stand for justice, adds to the momentum needed to shift societal norms. Lincoln's role in this case highlighted the importance of empathy, courage, and moral conviction, qualities that would come to define his presidency. Today, the echoes of this case remind us of our own responsibilities. Whether in a courtroom, on the streets, or in our daily lives, the fight for justice continues. Each of us has the power to contribute, just as Lincoln did, to a future where freedom and equality are more than ideals. They are realities for all. Abraham Lincoln's defense of a young enslaved girl was just one moment in a lifetime dedicated to justice and equality. It is a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage can have a ripple effect, shaping not only individual lives, but the course of history itself. This case was a seed planted in the fertile soil of Lincoln's convictions, growing into the towering legacy we know today. As we reflect on this story, let's remember the lessons it teaches us about empathy, resilience, and the power of standing up for what is right. Lincoln's journey shows us that change is possible, even in the face of overwhelming challenges. If you enjoyed uncovering this forgotten piece of history, make sure to subscribe to Forgotten History for more untold stories that shaped the world. Don't forget to like this video and share it with others who appreciate history's hidden gems. What do you think of Lincoln's actions in this case? Could we apply these lessons to our world today? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll delve into another incredible story from history that you've probably never heard before. Until then, thank you for watching Forgotten History, where we bring the past to life.